Let me start with something that might sting a little, but it needs to be said. If you've tried fasting, you're doing the hours, you're skipping meals, you're being disciplined, and the fat still isn't coming off the way you expected, it's probably not. Because fasting doesn't work. It's because of a few quiet habits that almost nobody talks about. Habits that seem harmless, habits that feel right, habits that don't break your fast technically, but they absolutely break your fat loss. And the worst part? Most people do these every single day without realizing they're sabotaging themselves. So today I want to pull back the curtain and show you the 5 fasting habits that quietly block fat loss, even when you think you're doing everything right. If you've ever felt stuck, frustrated, or confused while fasting, stay with me. Because one of these, it might be the missing piece for you. Let's get something clear first. Fasting is not magic. It's a tool. And like any tool, how you use it matters more than just owning it. A hammer can build a house or smash your thumb. Fasting works the same way. When it's done right, it lowers insulin, increases fat burning, and gives your body space to tap into stored energy. But when it's done carelessly, it can stall progress, spike stress hormones, and push your body into a defensive mode where it actually holds on to fat. Fasting only supports fat loss when your body feels safe and supported, not stressed, overworked, or sleep deprived. And this is something most people completely overlook when they start skipping meals. A lot of people approach fasting with a mindset of force, thinking that the more uncomfortable it feels, the more effective it must be. But the body doesn't work on punishment logic, it works on survival logic. When you remove food while also piling on stress from work, lack of sleep, intense workouts, and constant mental pressure, your nervous system doesn't interpret that as a healthy fat loss strategy. It interprets it as danger. The moment your brain senses danger, it shifts priorities away from fat loss and toward keeping you alive. And that shift happens silently through hormones, long before you ever notice it on the scale. One of the most important hormones involved here is cortisol, which is often called the stress hormone. But that label is too simple because cortisol is actually essential for life. It helps you wake up in the morning, mobilize energy, and respond to challenges. The problem isn't cortisol itself. The problem is when cortisol stays elevated for too long. Fasting on its own is a mild stressor, and that's not a bad thing, but when it's combined with poor sleep, emotional stress, overtraining, or excessive caffeine, cortisol can stay chronically high. When that happens, your body starts producing glucose internally through a process called gluconeogenesis, even though you haven't eaten anything. This raises blood sugar, which then triggers insulin release. And insulin is the hormone that tells your body to store energy rather than burn it. So even though you're fasting, even though you're eating fewer calories, your internal environment is telling your body to hold on to fat because it doesn't feel safe letting it go. Sleep plays a massive role in this sense of safety, and it's one of the most underestimated factors in fat loss. When you don't sleep enough, your body perceives that as a form of stress and instability. Hunger hormones shift, cortisol rises, and insulin sensitivity drops. This means that fasting on low sleep is like trying to build a house during an earthquake. You're removing food, but your body is already in a defensive state. So instead of smoothly transitioning into fat burning, it clings to energy reserves. This is why some people can fast effortlessly and lose fat when their sleep is solid, while others feel miserable and stuck doing the same routine. The difference isn't willpower, it's how safe the body feels. Another piece of this puzzle is mental and emotional stress, which is just as real to the body as physical stress. Worry, anxiety, pressure, and constant self criticism all activate the same stress pathways as physical threats. If you are fasting while constantly thinking about food, obsessing over results, judging your body, or feeling guilty about past eating habits, your nervous system stays in a heightened state. In that state, fat loss becomes secondary. The body doesn't want to burn stored energy when it thinks you might need it for survival. This is why people who approach fasting calmly, with patience and curiosity, often get better results than those who approach it with intensity and self punishment. Feeling supported also means feeling nourished when you do eat. A lot of people mistakenly think that fasting plus very small meals is the fastest way to lose fat. But what it often does is teach the body that food is unreliable. When your body doesn't trust that nourishment is coming, it adapts by slowing processes that aren't immediately necessary, including fat loss. Metabolism isn't just about calories, it's about signals. When you break your fast with enough protein, minerals, and real food, you send a signal of safety. You tell your body that resources are available, which paradoxically makes it more willing to release stored fat during the next fasting period. Overworking the body during fasting is another way people unknowingly create an unsafe environment internally. Training hard every day while underfueled, especially with high intensity workouts, can push stress hormones higher and higher. This doesn't mean exercise is bad during fasting. It means that the type and amount of exercise matters. Gentle movement, walking, light resistance training, and mobility work often support fat loss better during fasting than constant intense sessions. When movement feels supportive instead of draining, the body stays relaxed enough to burn fat instead of guarding it. Hydration and electrolytes also contribute to this feeling of safety. When insulin drops during fasting, the body releases sodium and water, which can lead to fatigue, dizziness, headaches, and weakness if electrolytes aren't replaced. These symptoms are often interpreted as hunger or a need to push harder, but they're really signs that the body needs support. When electrolytes are balanced, energy levels stabilize, stress decreases, and fasting becomes smoother. A calm body is a fat burning body. There's also a psychological safety component that's easy to miss. If fasting feels like a battle every day, your body learns to associate it with threat. But if fasting is flexible, intentional, and adjusted based on how you feel, it becomes something your body can adapt to without resistance. Safety doesn't mean comfort all the time, it means trust. Trust that food will come. Trust that rest is allowed. Trust that you're listening instead of forcing. When the body feels safe, hormonal balance improves. Insulin stays low but stable. Cortisol rises when needed and falls when it's not. Growth hormone increases to protect muscle and support fat burning, and thyroid hormones remain healthy enough to keep metabolism active. This internal balance is what allows fasting to work as intended. Without it, fasting becomes just another stressor layered onto an already overwhelmed system. Fat loss is not something you can threaten your body into. It's something you invite by creating the right internal conditions. Safety, rest, nourishment, and balance are not weaknesses, they're the foundation. When your body feels supported, fasting stops feeling like a fight and starts working with you instead of against you. Breaking your fast with enough protein and real whole foods is essential because the moment you eat after a fasting period sets the tone for your hormones, your metabolism, your energy for the rest of the day. Yet many people rush through this part without realizing how powerful it actually is. After the hours of not eating, your body is extremely sensitive to whatever you put into it, almost like dry soil absorbing the first rain. And that sensitivity can work for you or against you. When you break your fast properly, you send a signal of nourishment, safety, and stability. But when you break it poorly, you can undo many of the benefits you worked for during the fast itself. Protein plays a central role here because it provides the raw materials your body needs to maintain muscle, repair tissues, and keep metabolism running efficiently. During a fast, your body works hard to preserve muscle by increasing growth hormone and using fat as fuel. But it still needs reassurance that muscle tissue is not at risk long term. When you break your fast with a meal that is low in protein, your body doesn't get that reassurance. Over time, this can lead to subtle muscle loss, slower metabolism, and reduced energy expenditure. Muscle is metabolically active tissue, meaning it burns calories even at rest, so protecting it is crucial for fat loss. Protein sends a clear message that building and maintenance are possible, which helps keep fat loss moving forward. Real whole foods matter just as much as protein quantity. Highly processed foods are easy to overeat, quick to digest, and often spike blood sugar rapidly. After a fast, your insulin sensitivity is high, which means your body responds strongly to carbohydrates. This can be beneficial if those carbohydrates come from whole foods paired with protein and fiber, but when they come from refined sugars or processed grains, insulin can rise sharply and quickly shut down fat burning. This doesn't mean carbohydrates are bad, it means timing and quality matter. Whole foods digest more slowly, create steadier blood sugar responses, and support a hormonal environment that favors fat loss rather than storage. Another common mistake is undereating when breaking a fast. Many people feel they should stay light or keep calories as low as possible to maximize fat loss. But this approach often backfires. When your body goes through a fast and then receives too little food, it interprets that as continued scarcity. Scarcity signals tell the body to conserve energy, not waste it. Over time, this can lead to a lower metabolic rate and reduced thyroid hormone output and persistent fatigue. Fat loss becomes harder not because you're eating too much, but because your body has learned that energy is unreliable. A solid, nourishing meal reassures the body and makes it more willing to release stored fat later. Protein also has a powerful effect on appetite regulation. When you break your fast with enough protein, hunger hormones stabilize, cravings decrease, and satiety increases. This makes it easier to eat normally for the rest of the day without feeling out of control. When protein is lacking, hunger often rebounds strongly, leading to snacking, overeating, or grazing later on. People sometimes blame fasting itself for these issues, but in many cases, the real problem is how the fast was broken. The first meal acts like an anchor that stabilizes your appetite and energy levels. There's also a psychological component to breaking a fast properly. When people break their fast with nutrient-dense food, they tend to feel grounded and satisfied. When they break it with quick, processed options, they often feel bloated, tired, or guilty, which can trigger a cycle of restriction and overeating. Consistency matters more than perfection. Eating in a way that feels supportive and sustainable builds trust with your body, and trust reduces stress. Lower stress supports better hormonal balance, which supports fat loss. Micronutrients found in whole foods also play a role that's often overlooked. Vitamins, minerals, and trace elements are essential for metabolic processes, hormone production, and energy regulation. When you consistently break your fast with nutrient-poor foods, you may meet calorie needs but still leave your body undernourished. This can slow fat loss in subtle ways, affecting thyroid function, insulin sensitivity, and overall energy levels. Whole foods provide the building blocks your body needs to function efficiently, especially after a period of fasting. The timing of protein intake matters as well. After fasting, your muscles are particularly responsive to amino acids. Providing protein at this time supports muscle repair and maintenance, which is especially important if you're active or doing resistance training. This doesn't mean you need massive amounts, but consistency matters. Regularly breaking your fast with adequate protein helps preserve lean mass over time, which keeps your metabolism healthier and fat loss more sustainable. Another aspect that people overlook is how fast they eat when breaking a fast. After hours of hunger, it's easy to eat quickly, barely chewing, and overshooting fullness. Eating slowly and mindfully helps your digestive system ease back into activity and allows satiety signals to catch up. This supports better digestion, better blood sugar control, and a more relaxed nervous system response. A relaxed nervous system is more conducive to fat loss than a rushed, stressed one. Breaking your fast with intention doesn't mean obsessing over every gram or calorie. It means prioritizing nourishment over restriction. When your first meal is built around protein and whole foods, it becomes easier to listen to hunger and fullness cues for the rest of the day. Your energy feels more stable, your mood improves, and fasting feels less like a struggle and more like a rhythm. Over time, this approach creates a positive feedback loop. You fast, you break the fast well, and your body feels supported. Fat loss progresses, and fasting becomes easier. When people skip this step or rush it, they often feel stuck, frustrated, or confused about why fasting isn't delivering the results they expected. The answer is rarely the fast itself. It's almost always what happens right after it ends. Calorie-free drinks, excessive caffeine, and artificial sweeteners can quietly disrupt hormones and keep your body out of deep fat burning mode. And this is one of the most misunderstood parts of fasting because on the surface, it looks harmless. People are told that as long as there are no calories, the fast is intact. So they load up on black coffee, diet sodas, flavored sparkling water, zero-calorie sweeteners, and, and pre-workout drinks to get through the day. Technically, the calorie count stays at zero, but biologically, the body does not respond to calories alone. It responds to signals, and many of these drinks send signals that interfere with the very processes people are trying to activate through fasting. Caffeine is a good place to start because it's so widely accepted and even encouraged during fasting. In moderation, caffeine can increase alertness, improve mood, and slightly enhance fat mobilization. The problem starts when caffeine becomes a crutch rather than a tool. Drinking large amounts of coffee on an empty stomach can spike cortisol significantly. Cortisol's job is to mobilize energy. So when it rises, the body releases glucose into the bloodstream even though no food has been eaten. This rise in blood sugar can trigger insulin release, and insulin suppresses fat burning. So while you might feel energized and focused from caffeine, hormonally, you may be nudging your body out of a fat-burning state without realizing it. Over time, this pattern can create a situation where fasting feels harder instead of easier, hunger becomes more intense, energy crashes feel sharper, and irritability increases. People often respond by adding more caffeine, which pushes cortisol even higher, creating a feedback loop. The body remains stimulated rather than relaxed, and fat loss tends to work best in a state of calm efficiency, not constant stimulation. It's in a nervous system that never gets a break. It doesn't easily let go of stored energy. Artificial sweeteners add another layer of complexity. Even though they contain little to no calories, they can still activate the sweet taste receptors in the mouth and gut. For some people, this triggers an insulin response despite the absence of sugar. Insulin doesn't know whether sweetness came from calories or not. It responds to patterns it has learned over time. When insulin rises, fat burning slows or stops temporarily. If this happens repeatedly throughout the fasting window, the body may never fully enter a deep fat burning state. Artificial sweeteners can also increase appetite and cravings in subtle ways. Sweet taste without calories can confuse hunger signals, leading the brain to expect energy that never arrives. This can make hunger feel sharper and more persistent, especially later in the fast. People then assume they lack discipline or that fasting isn't for them, when in reality their appetite regulation has been disrupted by constant sweet stimulation. Diet sodas and flavored waters can have a similar effect, especially when consumed frequently. The carbonation, flavorings, and sweeteners keep the digestive system and brain engaged when they should be resting. Fasting is partly effective because it gives the body a break from constant input. When you're sipping something flavored all day, even if it has no calories, your body may not fully switch into the restorative, fat-burning mode that fasting is meant to promote. There's also a psychological component that matters more than people realize. Constantly consuming fasting-approved drinks can keep food and consumption at the center of attention. Instead of allowing hunger waves to rise and fall naturally, the mind stays focused on managing cravings. This creates mental stress, which becomes physical stress. Stress hormones rise, and once again, fat loss takes a backseat to survival. Another issue is that many of these drinks mask dehydration and electrolyte imbalance. Caffeine is mildly diuretic, and during fasting, insulin levels drop, causing the body to excrete more sodium in water. If electrolytes aren't replenished, symptoms like fatigue, headaches, weakness, and dizziness can appear. These sensations are often mistaken for hunger or low energy, leading people to add more caffeine or sweeteners instead of addressing the real issue. When the body lacks electrolytes, it doesn't feel safe or stable, and fat burning becomes less efficient. Excessive stimulation also affects sleep quality, even if caffeine is consumed early in the day. Elevated cortisol and nervous system activation can carry into the evening, making it harder to fall asleep or stay asleep. Poor sleep then worsens insulin sensitivity and increases hunger the next day, creating a cycle that undermines fat loss, even if fasting hours are technically maintained. None of this means you have to eliminate coffee or never use sweeteners. It means awareness and moderation matter. 1 cup of black coffee may be supportive for many people. 5 cups spread across a fast may not be. Occasional use of sweeteners might not cause noticeable issues, but constant exposure can. The body responds to patterns more than single events. When fasting feels unusually hard, when hunger feels relentless, or when fat loss stalls despite consistency, it's often worth looking at what's being consumed during the fast, rather than assuming the fast itself is the problem. Reducing stimulation allows the nervous system to settle. When the nervous system is calm, hormones align more easily with fat loss. Water, mineral water, and simple electrolyte solutions tend to support fasting better than a rotation of flavored, sweetened, or highly stimulating drinks. They keep hydration steady without confusing hormonal signals. As the body adjusts, many people notice that hunger becomes quieter, energy becomes more stable, and fasting feels less like something to endure and more like something that flows naturally. Deep fat burning is not just about the absence of calories, it's about creating an internal environment where the body feels no need to stay on high alert. When stimulation is reduced, cortisol settles, insulin stays low, and the body can finally access stored energy without resistance, allowing fasting to work as intended rather than being quietly undermined by habits that seem harmless, but keep the system in a constant state of activation and anticipation. Doing the exact same fasting routine every day can cause adaptation and plateaus. So variation and flexibility are often necessary for continued fat loss. Even though consistency is usually praised as the key to success. The body is incredibly good at adapting to repeated patterns, and this is both a strength and a challenge. When you first start fasting, the change itself creates a strong signal. Insulin drops, fat burning increases, and weight often comes off quickly. But as days turn into weeks and weeks turn into months, the body begins to treat that fasting window as normal. What once felt like a stressor becomes routine, and the fat loss signal loses some of its power. This doesn't mean fasting stops working. It means the body becomes more efficient. Efficiency sounds positive, but in the context of fat loss, it can mean conserving energy rather than releasing it. The body learns how to get through the fasting period with minimal expenditure, especially if calorie intake and activity patterns stay the same. Metabolic rate can subtly adjust downward, and fat loss slows or stalls. People often respond by fasting longer or eating less, but that approach can increase stress and push the body further into conservation mode. Variation helps prevent this adaptation by keeping the body responsive. When fasting windows change slightly, meal timing shifts, or caloric intake varies from day to day, the body receives a more dynamic set of signals. This mimics how humans historically ate, with some days of scarcity and other days of abundance. These fluctuations help maintain metabolic flexibility, which is the ability to switch efficiently between burning carbohydrates and fat. Metabolic flexibility is strongly linked to successful fat loss and long-term weight control. Rigid fasting schedules can also create psychological stress, especially when life doesn't cooperate. Social events, work demands, and family obligations don't always align with a fixed eating window. When people feel trapped by their fasting schedule, stress increases. That stress can raise cortisol, disrupt sleep, and make fasting feel burdensome rather than supportive. Flexibility reduces this stress and allows fasting to fit into life instead of life being forced to fit fasting. Another reason variation matters is hormonal rhythm. Hormones are not static and they respond to patterns over time. Eating at the same times every day, fasting for the same duration, and consuming similar calories can flatten hormonal responses. Introducing variation can refresh those responses. For example, eating earlier on some days and later on others can influence insulin sensitivity differently. Shorter fasts mixed with occasional longer fasts can provide benefits without overwhelming the system. The goal is not randomness, but thoughtful variation. Plateaus often create frustration, and frustration leads people to question their discipline or blame their body. In reality, plateaus are often signs that the body has adapted and needs a new signal. This doesn't always mean doing something extreme. Sometimes it means eating a little more for a few days, prioritizing rest, or reducing fasting frequency temporarily. These changes can actually restart fat loss by reassuring the body that resources are available and stress is manageable. Exercise adaptation works in a similar way. When the body does the same workout repeatedly, progress is slows. Introducing new movements, intensities, or rest periods stimulates new adaptation. Fasting is no different. The body thrives on intelligent variation, not endless repetition. There is also an important emotional component to routine. For some people, rigid fasting becomes a source of control rather than health. Meals are skipped not because the body isn't hungry, but because the clock says so. Over time, this can weaken the connection between hunger signals and eating behavior. Fat loss works best when there is still a dialogue between you and your body, not a dictatorship. Flexibility keeps that dialogue open. Variation also supports social and emotional well-being, which indirectly supports fat loss. Being able to enjoy a meal with others without anxiety reduces stress and guilt. Lower stress improves hormonal balance. When fasting is flexible, it becomes easier to sustain long-term, and sustainability is what ultimately determines success. Some people worry that variation will slow progress or cause loss of discipline. In practice, the opposite is often true. When fasting feels less rigid, people are more likely to stick with it consistently over time. Consistency doesn't mean doing the exact same thing every day. It means returning to supportive habits even when there are fluctuations. The body responds best to clear but adaptable signals. Fasting can be one of those signals, but only when it's used as part of a flexible strategy rather than a rigid rule. When variation is introduced thoughtfully, fat loss often resumes, energy improves, and the process feels less like a grind and more like a natural rhythm that can be maintained. Without constant effort or frustration, fat loss is driven by hormonal balance and consistency, not extreme discipline or punishment. And this is one of the hardest ideas for people to truly accept because it goes against everything diet culture has taught us. From a young age, many people learn that results come from pushing harder, restricting more, and overriding the body's signals. That mindset might produce short term changes, but long term fat loss works very differently. The body is not a machine that responds best to force. It is a biological system designed to protect you. And when it senses punishment, it adapts in ways that often block the very outcome you're trying to achieve. Hormones are the real drivers behind fat loss, and they respond to patterns, not moments of intensity. Insulin, cortisol, leptin, ghrelin, thyroid hormones, and sex hormones all work together to determine whether your body feels safe enough to burn stored fat. Extreme discipline often disrupts this balance. When you constantly push through hunger, ignore fatigue, and restrict food aggressively, stress hormones rise. Cortisol becomes chronically elevated, insulin sensitivity worsens, and thyroid output can slow. None of this happens overnight, which is why people often don't realize what's going on until progress stalls or reverses. Punishment-based approaches also create inconsistency, even when they look disciplined on the surface. People might fast aggressively for several days, then overeat due to intense hunger, guilt, or fatigue. This cycle confuses the body. One day it receives signals of extreme scarcity, the next day signals of excess. Fat loss thrives on predictability and trust, not extremes. When the body doesn't know what to expect, it tends to hold on to energy rather than release it. Consistency doesn't mean perfection. It means creating patterns your body can rely on. Eating enough when you eat, resting when you're tired, fasting when it feels supportive, rather than forced. These consistent signals allow hormones to settle into a rhythm that supports fat loss. Leptin, the hormone that helps regulate energy balance and appetite, works best when the body feels nourished over time. When leptin signaling is disrupted by chronic restriction, hunger increases and fat loss becomes harder. Another issue with extreme discipline is that it often disconnects people from their internal cues. Hunger, fullness, energy levels, and mood all provide valuable information. When these signals are constantly overridden, the body becomes harder to read. Fat loss becomes something you try to control from the outside, rather than something you support from within. Listening to feedback doesn't mean giving in to every craving. It means recognizing patterns and responding intelligently. Consistency also applies to mindset. When fat loss is framed as punishment, failure feels personal. Missing a fast, eating more than planned, or needing rest becomes a reason for self-criticism. This mental stress translates into physical stress. Stress hormones rise, sleep suffers, and appetite regulation worsens. When fat loss is framed as a process of support and care, setbacks are seen as data rather than flaws. This calmer mindset supports better hormonal balance. The body also responds to consistency in sleep, movement, and daily routines. Sleeping at irregular hours, training intensely one week and not at all the next, or fasting unpredictably without intention can all disrupt hormonal rhythms. Gentle consistency in these areas creates a stable internal environment where fat loss can occur more easily. This doesn't mean rigid schedules, it means general reliability. Punishment-driven approaches often ignore the role of recovery. Rest days, adequate sleep, and mental downtime are not signs of laziness. They're essential for hormonal regulation. Growth hormone, which supports fat burning and muscle preservation, is released primarily during deep sleep. When recovery is neglected, fat loss suffers no matter how disciplined eating or fasting appears. Another overlooked aspect is sustainability. Extreme approaches can feel motivating at first, but they are rarely sustainable. When something can't be maintained, results don't last. Sustainable habits allow hormones to stay balanced long term. This is why people who lose fat slowly but steadily often keep it off, while those who lose it rapidly through punishment often regain it. Consistency also builds trust between you and your body. When your body learns that food will come, rest is allowed, and stress is managed, it becomes more willing to release stored energy. Fat is not just stored calories, it's a safety buffer. When safety is established through consistent care, that buffer becomes less necessary. Fat loss is not a moral achievement. It's a biological response. Treating it like a test of discipline creates unnecessary pressure and often backfires. Treating it like a process of alignment allows the body to do what it's designed to do when conditions are right. The most effective fat loss strategies are often the least dramatic. They don't look impressive on social media. They look boring, repetitive, and calm. But behind that calm is a hormonal environment that supports fat burning rather than resists it. When you shift from punishment to consistency, everything changes. Hunger becomes manageable. Energy becomes steadier. Cravings quiet down. Progress becomes predictable rather than chaotic. The body stops fighting and starts cooperating. Fat loss happens when the body feels regulated, not threatened. Discipline has a place, but it should support consistency, not replace it. When consistency is built around nourishment, rest, movement, and realistic fasting practices, fat loss becomes a side effect rather than a battle. And that is where real, lasting change begins. If this helped you see fasting in a new light, make sure you subscribe because we go deeper into this kind of real, practical health and fitness content all the time. And if you know someone who's fasting but stuck, share this with them. Sometimes the smallest shifts create the biggest result.